The Indian stock market, represented by the Nifty index, has been on a slippery slope. This decline coincides with escalating trade tensions initiated by the Trump administration. Trump's protectionist policies, including threats of reciprocal tariffs, have sent shockwaves through the global economy. Tariff king India, heavily reliant on U.S. exports, finds itself particularly vulnerable. The uncertainty surrounding trade policies has spooked investors, leading to capital flight and a weakening rupee. Although the RBI has intervened heavily in the last few days to prevent USDINR from reaching 90, it may not be sustainable in the long run, and USDINR may soon reach 95.100 levels by 2026. High external debt and unfavorable FX or USDINR rate is a headwind for big Indian corporates including Adani and Ambani, although for the Indian federal government, it's not a big issue right now. This confluence of factors has cast a shadow over India's economic outlook, raising concerns about growth prospects. Despite higher USDINR may be positive for Nifty EPS, as almost 60% of Nifty earnings come from export. But at the same time, a large part of this export may be now vulnerable to Trump's whims and fancies. The Indian economy, once hailed as a bright spot in the global landscape, is now grappling with a multitude of challenges including the legacy issue of no price stability, high unemployment, underemployment, and poor productivity. India, the world's largest democracy, needs political funding reform, which is the root cause of India's rampant corruption, poor inadequate infra, and sky-high public debt. The devaluation of local currency INR also causes higher imported inflation. The trade war initiated by US President Trump has amplified these concerns as the US is the only major trading partner of India, which has a significant trading surplus to the tune of almost $100 billion. India earns net USD from significant IT service exports and NRI remittances from the US. India's export-oriented sectors, which contribute significantly to its GDP, are facing headwinds from potential tariff and other regulatory like H-1B visa barriers. This uncertainty has dampened investor sentiment, leading to a decline in the stock market and a depreciation of the rupee. The situation is further exacerbated by rising oil prices which threaten to widen India's current account deficit and fuel inflation. The Indian government faces the daunting task of navigating these turbulent waters and restoring confidence in the economy. Indian policymakers need to address structural bottlenecks that have long hampered growth, such as bureaucratic red tape and inadequate infrastructure. Simultaneously, they must find ways to boost domestic demand and reduce reliance on U.S. tech service exports. India needs to restore price stability first, without which no economy can function smoothly. India's central bank RBI should be given a US Fed-like dual mandate of minimum price stability and maximum employment. RBI should target at least 3% core CPI inflation on a durable basis as price stability, instead of 4% total CPI with a permissible tolerance band of 2% on both sides. RBI should also ensure the headline unemployment rate stays below 4.5% on a sustainable basis, while 3.5% should be seen as the maximum employment level. Although now, Indian government claims the headline unemployment level is now around 3.6%, it's a distorted data. The actual unemployment rate as per a private survey is around 8.0% for the last 2 decades. India needs to publish correct and reliable economic data like core CPI inflation, unemployment rate, and overall employment situation of the country, so that policymakers can plan for an appropriate policy. India's economic future hinges on its ability to adapt to the changing global landscape and implement reforms that foster sustainable and inclusive growth. The road ahead for the Indian economy is fraught with challenges, but it is not without opportunities. India has a young and growing population which presents a significant domestic market. But now it seems that India's so-called demographic dividend is now fast turning into a demographic nightmare due to a lack of sufficient quality, well-paying jobs. By focusing on policies that promote entrepreneurship, innovation, and skill development, India can harness the potential of its demographic dividend. Moreover, India can leverage its strategic location and growing economic clout to forge stronger trade ties with other countries. The key lies in making prudent policy choices that prioritize long-term growth over short-term gains. Trump's trade war has cast a long shadow over the global economy, with India feeling the heat. The Nifty, a barometer of India's economic health, has taken a hit as investors grapple with the uncertainty. India's export-oriented sectors, major contributors to Nifty earnings, are particularly vulnerable. The US, a key trading partner, has threatened tariffs on a range of Indian goods, from steel and aluminum to pharmaceuticals and textiles. The IT sector, a crown jewel of the Indian economy, is staring at potential headwinds. With a significant portion of its revenue generated from exports to the US, the industry is bracing for a slowdown. The Trump administration's stance on H-1B visas, a lifeline for Indian tech professionals, has added to the anxiety. The uncertainty surrounding trade policies is already impacting investment decisions, leading to project delays and hiring freezes. Pharmaceuticals, another pillar of India's export basket, is also feeling the tremors. The US, a major market for Indian generic drugs, has been pushing for price controls and stricter regulations. This has created a climate of uncertainty for Indian pharmaceutical companies, which are already grappling with intense competition and regulatory hurdles. The threat of tariffs adds another layer of complexity, potentially impacting their profitability and global competitiveness. If India reduces tariffs to match US, then domestic manufacturers or products may be in a tizzy, as Indian consumers will prefer quality US goods at a comparable, even similar price of local producers. The trade war comes at a time when the Indian economy is already facing headwinds from rising oil prices and a weakening rupee, lack of price stability, and double-digit unemployment with very high youth unemployment. India's average inflation or total CPI rate is around 5.0% for the last 2 decades. Against that, the economy needs to grow at least 10.0% in real terms to provide adequate employment for its vast labor force of almost 10 million entering fresh every year. But the country growing around 6.0% on an average in the last 20 years in real terms. The combination of these factors has led to a decline in investor sentiment reflected in the Nifty's downward spiral. The situation underscores the need for India to diversify its export markets and reduce its dependence on the US. It also highlights the urgency for structural reforms to improve competitiveness and attract foreign investment. The trade war has not only impacted India's exports but also triggered a domino effect on the rupee. The Indian currency has been on a downward spiral against the US dollar, hitting record lows. This depreciation, while offering a marginal boost to exports, has significant downsides for an import-dependent economy like India. The rising cost of imports is fueling inflation, making essential goods and services more expensive for consumers. The energy sector is bearing the brunt of the rupee's fall. India, a major importer of crude oil, is feeling the pinch as the cost of its energy imports surges. This has a cascading effect on transportation costs, further fueling inflation. The manufacturing sector, reliant on imported raw materials and machinery, is also facing rising input costs, squeezing profit margins. The ripple effect is felt across industries, impacting consumer spending and overall economic growth. The weakening rupee has also made it more expensive for Indian companies to service their foreign currency debt, especially by the private sector. This has raised concerns about a potential rise in defaults and its impact on the financial sector. The Reserve Bank of India, RBI, has been intervening in the currency market to stem the rupee's slide, but its efforts have had limited success. The situation underscores the vulnerability of emerging economies like India to global headwinds, and the need for a multi-pronged approach to stabilize the currency. The government's efforts to attract foreign investment have also been hampered by the rupee's volatility. Foreign investors are wary of investing in a country with a depreciating currency, as it erodes their returns. This has further dampened investor sentiment and put pressure on the government to address structural issues and restore confidence in the economy. The rupee's trajectory will depend on a confluence of factors, including global trade dynamics, oil prices, and the government's policy response and overall macroeconomy situation. In the face of mounting economic challenges, the Indian government has resorted to a combination of fiscal and monetary stimulus measures. However, these interventions have fallen short of expectations, failing to provide the much-needed impetus to the flagging economy. The government's fiscal space is constrained by a widening budget deficit and mounting debt. This limits its ability to prime the economy through increased spending or tax cuts. The Reserve Bank of India, RBI, tasked with maintaining price stability and supporting growth, has also been proactive. It has slashed interest rates and injected liquidity into the banking system to encourage lending and boost investment. However, these measures have had a muted impact on the ground as RBI's latest rate cut and subsequent lack of guidance may be too little and too late. RBI is far behind the curve. Similarly, recent income tax cuts for higher middle class may be also too little and too late to stimulate discretionary consumer spending in a big way. India needs to reduce GST rate in a simple format to boost discretionary consumer spending. India also needs to provide adequate quality and free, universal education and healthcare sector to reduce overall cost of living for its citizens. The resultant saving may also help in boosting discretionary consumer spending in the country. Banks, burdened with bad loans and wary of risk aversion, have been reluctant to lend. Banks and financials are now preferring quality borrowers than quantity, with a focus of return of capital, rather than return on capital. The effectiveness of both fiscal and monetary policies has been hampered by structural bottlenecks that continue to plague the Indian economy. Cumbersome bureaucratic procedures, inadequate infrastructure, and restrictive labor laws act as roadblocks to investment and job creation. The government's efforts to address these issues have been piecemeal and slow-paced. The lackluster impact of stimulus measures highlights the need for a more comprehensive and coordinated approach. Structural reforms that address the root causes of India's economic woes are crucial. Simultaneously, the government needs to prioritize efficient spending and focus on creating a conducive environment for private investment. Without these measures, the impact of any stimulus is likely to be short-lived and ineffective. So, let's dive into the budget for the fiscal year 2026. It's a crucial document that outlines the government's financial strategy for the year. First up, we have to consider the revenue projections. Are these realistic given the current economic climate? Then, there's the expenditure side. How is the government planning to allocate funds across various sectors? And of course, we can't ignore the fiscal deficit. Is it manageable? Or are we looking at potential issues down the line? India's federal government is now paying almost 45% of core tax revenue as interest on public debt, which is very high compared to 5 to 15% for comparable economies. China, EU spend around 5 to 6%, while US, Japan, 10 to 15% of their core tax revenue as interest on public debt. Finally, what does this budget mean for the average citizen? Will it bring relief or add to their financial burden? These are the questions we need to answer as we dissect India's FY26 financial blueprint. There is no roadmap to bring minimum price stability and maximum employment in the budget document, which are of paramount importance for any economy. The Reserve Bank of India, or RBI, has been at the forefront of navigating through turbulent economic waters. Its monetary policy decisions are pivotal in steering the economy towards stability. By adjusting interest rates and employing various financial tools, the RBI aims to control inflation and stimulate growth. But RBI is still sounding too much hawkish and not ready to cut rates in line of Fed. Charting a course for India's economic future requires a multifaceted approach. It's not just about short-term fixes, but rather, a comprehensive strategy that encompasses fiscal prudence, investment in infrastructure, and fostering innovation to increase the productive capacity of the economy so that it can match with increasing demand for the 1.5 billion population in the country, resulting in minimum price stability with ease of living. The government, private sector, and citizens must work together to create a resilient and sustainable economic environment. So how do we navigate these complex waters and ensure a prosperous future for all? Structural reforms are essential for achieving sustainable growth in India. These reforms, which include labor to land and also process. India needs proper deregulation, quality universal free education, and lower input costs to improve its flagging manufacturing sector and to create jobs for the masses as we have seen in China. Indirect tax, GST tariffs reforms, and improvements in the ease of doing business. India needs to strengthen personal income tax collection by providing quality employment for its masses, rather than too much stress on GST, tariffs, and other indirect taxes on goods and services. India also needs to provide quality and free healthcare for the general public on an adequate scale and unemployment benefits rather than political dole money, cash for vote policy, and Robin Hood politics. Policies should be designed to enhance productivity and competitiveness. It's a long-term vision that requires commitment and perseverance. By addressing these structural issues, India can lay the foundation for a more robust and inclusive economy. A vision for India's economic resurgence is not just a dream, but a tangible goal. It involves leveraging the country's demographic dividend, harnessing technology, and promoting entrepreneurship. By fostering an environment where businesses can thrive and innovation can flourish, India can position itself as a global economic powerhouse. The journey may be challenging, but with a clear vision and collective effort, India's economic resurgence is within reach.